Hello everyone and welcome back to Just Finish Coding. In this new Python series, we're going to be making a two-player tic-tac-toe game using Pygame. So as you can see, it is a fairly simple program, but it does have quite a level of complexity in it. So we have a basic board and we also have three different end screens for an X-wins, an O-wins, and also for a tie game. So that's enough talk for the intro now. Let's get right into our code. Okay, so before we proceed, it's very important for you to download all of these images that I have on the left side of my screen. And you can find all of that within a downloadable link, which will take you to a Google Drive attachment. And basically within that, you can download any of these files which you want. And I'll also be attaching a part by part, Python file so that in case you're stuck in a particular part, instead of, trying to frantically reach out in the comments for answers, you can just download that particular file and then continue with the parts, as long as you don't have any difficulty understanding the code and it's just some technical glitch. Okay, so now let's get into it. The first thing I'm going to do, since this is a game, is to import the Pygame module, and in addition to just importing it, I'll also import it as P so that I can save a little bit of time coding. Okay, so the next thing I'll do is to initialize all the Pygame modules, Pygame methods, not modules, and to do that you can just type in p.init. Okay, fairly simple, and this is going to give us access to a lot of methods that we otherwise wouldn't be able to use. Okay, so next I'm going to start setting up the window, and to do that I need a width and a height. So I'm going to set up both my width and height to be 500 pixels, and this is going to work well with the square tic-tac-toe board. So after you've done this, you can start to set up your window itself. So I'm going to store that in the variable win, and to set up a window it's pretty easy. Just say p.display.setMode, and within this you can throw in a tuple with the width and the height variables inside that tuple. Okay, so next we can type in the heading of that particular window, and that's called a caption. So to do that, you can just say p.display.setCaption, and as far as our title is concerned, I'm going to just say tic-tac-toe, and that is going to be pretty much it. So the next thing I'm going to do is to set up a simple clock to control our frame rate. Now we typically don't need a clock in smaller games where it's just a little bit of code. But in most games, it's very important to have a clock because we'd like to control the frame rate of the game, and it does prove to be crucial in multiple occasions. So to do that, we can say, oops, not this way, just type in space, and we can say clock is equal to p.time.clock. And remember that this clock which I have right here is a class, and to create this clock on the left hand side as a variable, not as a variable but as an object of the clock, we need to type in and open and close brackets right here. So next we can get into initializing the images. So I'm going to leave in a simple comment called square images just so that it makes things easy when we come back for it once again. So the first square image I will have is called blank image. And we'll be loading this particular image right here. It's just an empty square and extremely simple. So to do that, you can say p.image.load, and after this you just need to type in the file name. So in this case the file name is blank.png, and next we can load in the next image, and maybe that was not a pun really. So we can just call this x image, and this time we'll load in x.png. So not x wins, but just x.png. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to duplicate this line once again, and now I'm going to type in O image, and the O image, which you can see right here, is going to be this one. So we just have an O in the center of the square, and to load the image, you just type in O.png. So all of this is very simple. And now we can get into the square class, and this is where we start to get into sprites and stuff. So this is assuming that you have a somewhat rudimentary knowledge of how to use sprites in Pygame. Now in case you don't know how to use sprites, then I will leave a link for you right here in the form of a card, and you can check out the entire playlist I made on Pygame sprites. So if you're still here, I'm going to assume that you've watched all that entire playlist, or you learn sprites from somewhere else. Either way, that's fine. We can start coding in our class. So I'm going to say class, and I'm going to call this class square, and obviously I'm going to use the square as a sprite. So I'm going to be inheriting from the sprite module. So I'm going to just say p.sprite.sprite, and the second sprite is a class. So we're inheriting from there. Now we can just, type in that colon. And first we need to go ahead with the init method. So def init, and after this we have to init the super class. So we can say super dot underscore underscore super dot underscore init, just like this. And now we can get into the main parts of our code. So I'm going to head back into this, into these parameters here, and I'm going to enter in 3 parameters. So the first one is going to be ID. The next one is going to be the first one is going to be XID. The second one is going to be YID, and the third one is going to be number. Okay, I'm just going to call it, I'll call it number anyway. So we'll have these 3 arguments, formal parameters, whatever you want to call them. We'd have the user entering these 3 in when, not the user, me, but when we're creating objects later on, we will enter them in, and based on that we will store their particular the particular values of that object. So first I'll have a fixed self.width and a self.height. So our width is going to be 120, and I'm also going to have the same value for the height because it works pretty well, and you obviously know it's a square, so it's got to have the same width and height. So next we can get into the self.x variable. So we're going to have self.x is equal to xid times self.width. Okay, so fairly simple. It should be, no-brainer to understand. And as far as our self.y attribute is concerned, I'm just going to change this to be yid, and I'm also going to change this to be self.height. Obviously the width and height are the same, but it just helps me using that particular distinction. So next I'm going to have self.number, and I'm just going to say self.number is equal to number. And lastly, I'm also going to have something called self.content, and I will not be using this in this video. I'll use it in the future, but just store it as of now. Just have an empty string here, and next we can get into storing the images. So this is where the sprite starts to get crucial, and we need to make sure that this particular attribute is named as image. Otherwise, your code will start to malfunction, and you can use the image as the blank image. So next you need to make sure that the image is resized. So you can say self.image is equal to p.transform.scale, and after this you just need to type in whatever whatever variable, or in this case attribute, that you want to scale, and then you need to type in the new dimension. So in this case it's going to be self.width, and it's going to be self.height. So let me quickly type that in. So self.height, and there we go. So the next thing we need to do after we're done with this is to have a rectangle for the particular sprite, and to do that I'm just going to use a simple getrect command. So self.rect is equal to self.image.getRect, and that is pretty much it. So this is all we will need for us within our sprite's init method. And within our sprite's update method, we're just going to blit it in a particular place within our screen. So within update, you can just say self, not blit it, just position it. That's what I meant. So we can just say self.rect.center is equal to, and here we need to enter in 2 values in the form of a tuple, the x and y, and we'll just say self.x comma self.y. So self.y, and that will be pretty much all you need within your square class for this video. Okay, so now we can start to scroll down and create the objects of that square class. So first I'm going to have a variable called num, which is equal to 1 initially, and basically each square is going to have a particular number, okay, and the square on the top left is going to be number 1, then it's going to be number 2 for the square on its right, then number 3, then number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, and finally number 9. So it's just going to be a simple order, but it's going to help us when we're starting to compare, which player has won and so on. So first we have a variable called number. Next we can have an x and y variable, but we can just use it directly in a for loop. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to say for y in range, and this is where we need to be a little bit careful with this whole range function. And the first value is going to be considered and also the second value. So you need to be and not the second value. So for example, if I type in 1 to 4, y is going to have the values 1, then 2, and then 3, but not 4. So just need to be a little bit careful there. But as of now, we can just say for y in range 1, 4, and within that we can nest for x in range 1, 4. Now you can do this the other way as well. Things wouldn't go wrong, but you just need to be a little bit careful when you are typing in the next line of code, which is, I'm going to say sq is equal to, and I'm going to say square followed by x comma y comma num. Okay, and in case you did it the other way, then you need to make sure that you have y comma x comma num, and I just thought that was a bit weird, so I decided to do it this way. So now we need to create a group in order to put all of this put this sprite into, and only then will we have some sort of valid output. I'm going to skip it as of now. I'm just going to say square group dot add. Just know that I'm going to create a square group a little bit later on, and at that time this will this error will disappear. So as of now, just say square group dot add sq, and I'm also going to have a list of squares. So I'm just going to say squares dot append square. So this time once again you can just use brackets and say squares dot append square like this. Now if you just leave it this way, you'll have all the squares having just one value as their number. So you also need to make sure that number is constantly being incremented. So I'm just going to say num plus is equal to 1, and that will be all for our nested for loops. Okay, so now we can start to create those two things I mentioned. So first we need to make sure that there is a group for all the objects of the sprites to be thrown into, and next we can create a simple empty list. I'm going to do the empty list first just because it's easier. All you have to type in is squares followed by an empty open and close square brackets. So next we can just say square group. So square group is equal to, and we need to get a group from the sprite class. So we can say p.sprite dot group, and then just an open and close brackets like this, and we've created a group, and you can see that all of these errors have just disappeared just like that. So now we can start to download, or not download, but initialize the background image which we'll be using throughout the game. So to do that, you can say background is equal to p.image.load, and you can follow this up with background.png. Okay, so next we can resize the background. So once again, you can say background is equal to p.transform.scale, and this time we can enter in background followed by the dimensions, which are once again going to be width comma height, since our background image, in this case it's just one color, and that's going to fill up the entire screen. So obviously we need these two dimensions in there. So after this, we can just straight away get into the main method, not main method, but the main loop. So I'm going to have the boolean variable as run. So run is equal to true, and while run, the first thing I'll do is make sure that our clock is constantly ticking. So clock.tick followed by, I'm going to play this at 60 frames per second. So clock.tick 60, and now we need to make sure that the window can be closed. So for event in p.event.get, and each and every time the event type, so you can just say if event, not this way, so if event.type is equal to p.quit, which means the user has closed the window, then all we have to do is exit this loop. So you can just say run is equal to false, and that will be pretty much it. So now we can get into the main part of this code, and that is we need to make sure that the background is blitted onto the screen. So we can say not this way. So we can say win.blit. So win.blit, and here we can first blit the background at 0, 0. And now we also need to make sure that we update our square group and also draw it. So let me say square group.draw, and I will also update my square group. So square group.update. Okay, there we go. And I'm also going to make sure that the Pygame window is the Pygame display is constantly updating, otherwise we'll never see any output of our own. So you can just type in a p.display.update and that should be pretty much all you need to do. And okay, before that, I just realized that I had a small error and you need to specify the surface in which you're drawing on. So I didn't specify when, which was why the whole error was popping up. So there we go. I think that will be all we need to do. So you can right click and click run the program if you're using PyCharm. And when the window does show up, you should see your output just the way I'm seeing on my screen right now. And that will be pretty much all I will be doing in this video. In the next video, we'll start to get into how you can click on the squares and then have the square switch its image. But all of that, like I mentioned, is going to be for another time. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure you leave a like and also don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.